Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome in Baumhaus. Sorry for the technical delay. We're here in Baumhaus Project Space in Berlin-Wedding. I'm Karen, and we're since beginning of this year partner of the FOODSHIFT project, and we're really proud now to finally host the Berlin Lab regional kickoff. We have a full program today. We do this space as a hybrid event. So if you could show the text slide. We do the program, we do the streaming over the open source software Big Blue Button. In collaboration with Bits and Bäume, that's a citizen movement in Berlin to connect digitization and transformation towards sustainability. We hope everything works out technically. It's the first hybrid event we do in Baumhaus, so let's all work together to make this happen. There is Lisa, who is looking at the chat. So if you guys who joined us online have any questions or comments, idea, feedback, please write it in the chat. And then Lisa will tell us here in the space for the questions, or you can also put a little star in the chat, and then you can speak. Then, if you have any technical difficulties, you can also write the email to Lisa or write in the chat, and we try to solve that. We are also, next slide please, would also like to tell you that we are recording this meeting, and it will be published later. So you can turn off your cameras, and otherwise we now take it as your consent if you're participating that we can use the recording. Okay, technical stuff is almost over. Just a few words for the people in the space. So we have two mics. So we have the one mic for the panel. So we pass this around, and we have one mic for the people in the public. So you place that. So you give that around if you want to talk, so everybody can hear what we're saying. Okay, then the program slide, please. So the program for today is we start with the welcome and panel. Then we have 1 hour of short presentations and inputs to show you what we plan to do here in the Berlin Lab in the next 2 years as cooperation partners of FOODSHIFT. Then we have a really long lunch break, and then we come back together at 3 and hear from stakeholders and FOODSHIFT and food projects from Berlin-Brandenburg region, and talk about what we're going to work on and collaborate on in the next 2 years. Because this is a kick-off meeting, so this is the start of going public for us at the Berlin Lab, and it's mainly an invitation to get in touch with us if you have ideas for collaborations, if you want to meet with us. We're really looking forward to broaden our network and to see how we can work together in the next 2.5 years and beyond. But let's start with where we're at now and what FOODSHIFT project actually is. So I would give the word over to Beatrice in a little bit to do a little introduction to the FOODSHIFT 2030 project. Then on the panel is also José. Both Beatrice and José are part of the Berlin Lab from ZALF, a research institute. Then we have Dirk and Poppy. Dirk Wascher and Poppy Ear are part of the FOODSHIFT 2030 project, but not the Berlin Lab, but responsible for all of the partners in the regions. Beatrice is going to tell you more about that soon. And we're going to have a discussion with them and with Luke, who is the scientific project manager who will join online to give you an overview of the idea of FOODSHIFT and what we can actually achieve with this project. So please, Beatrice.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hello to the people here in the room, but also hello to the people online. I will give you a short introduction into what FOODSHIFT actually is, how it's set up, what the goal is, and what we've done so far. The FOODSHIFTies among us may already know some of it, but just to remind you that this is a regional kickoff, so especially targeted towards the local actors here in Berlin-Brandenburg. And yeah, maybe next slide.
Presentation or what kind of slide?
Yeah.
Yes. Just a moment as we find the right slides. But maybe while we look for it, I can already tell you that FOODSHIFT started last year in January 2020, and it goes till December 2023, so we have 4 years to spark a food system transition in Berlin. Hopefully build lasting connections and actions that the transition will continue. That is one of the idea of FOODSHIFT, that it won't be over after the 4 years when the project is over, but this is a beginning. And the goal is to establish some connections, build up a network, identify possible actions to continue the transition. Yes, thank you, there it is. And the slogan or the premises, the idea that FOODSHIFT started off with was the recognition that we need a food system transformation in Europe. It's not a question anymore whether this is necessary or not. We start with the idea that we need a transition, and the question is how? How can we achieve it? Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. Here's a big overview. I don't know how much you can see of it. I guess the participants online actually can see it much better. Yeah, that's perfect. That's just a project overview. In the middle, you can see all the FOODSHIFTies together. That was at the kickoff meeting in Copenhagen, with all the different labs, with a network partner, with a project coordinator, with everyone together, with the babies from some, so it's like a whole big crowd. And the slogan also of FOODSHIFT is that the future of food is low carbon, circular and plant-based. And within the project, we always try to find strategic points where we can actually implement it and realize it. It's not always the 3 topics at the same time. There might be some focus. Some project partners focus on the low carbon idea, other project partners focus on the circular idea, and others on the plant-based idea. But sometimes I think we also, in Baumhaus, we touch upon all 3 topics, more or less. It is a European funded project in the Horizon 2020 program. The coordinator sits in Copenhagen, but the participants come from all over Europe. I will say more about the participating city regions in a moment. Anything else? The online participants can also see in the top right corner the social media links, the websites. The people in the room cannot see it because of the lamp, but you can find more information on the website. There's a resource hub with resources and knowledge we created so far. There's more description about the labs. So please check it out if you want to learn more. Next slide, please. Yes, and here in a few words, again, as a reminder, the big overall vision is transforming the food system towards a low carbon, plant-based and circular food future. That's the overall goal. But how it's achieved, it's very different in every place, with different people, with different agendas and different resources. Next slide, please. But there is a common approach across all labs, which is that FOODSHIFT wants to utilize and support the transformation through the power of citizens. So they start with citizen-driven innovations and support them either by co-creating knowledge or consulting them, advising them. We also made the action plans together in a more structured way. What is the goal? How can we get there? And so it's a more structured process than just starting from zero. And there are 9 so-called FOODSHIFT Accelerator labs in Europe. And another approach is the collaboration between local governments, NGOs, SMEs, and the citizens. So the collaborative approach. Or yesterday we also talked about a mutual beneficial partnerships. You can also frame it like that. But the collaborative idea is very important. And also that it's not just top-down. Researchers tell the citizens or the partners what to do and how it's done, but it's co-designed, co-created. The knowledge comes from the bottom up and the top down, or from left and right. Yes. And it is also an iterative innovation process, which means it goes in loops and steps. We don't have a clear agenda and know, okay, we do this and this and this, and we want to achieve this and this and this, like a ladder. It's more like a roller coaster. It goes back, sometimes you learn something, sometimes you figure out it doesn't work and you need to improve it. So it's an iterative innovation process. And the 9 cases that are participating are from Athens, Avignon, Barcelona, Bari, Berlin, Brasov, Copenhagen, Ostend, and Wrocław in Poland. And each lab has their own themes, what they focus on. Whereas in the last couple of days, the focus was on Berlin and this development, setting up and establishment of a food hub. But in the other city regions, it's, for instance, in Athens, they focus on an open school lab. It focuses on school kids' education, on food literacy. In Avignon, it's about the regional food for all in the school canteens. So it's about collaborations and networkings with regional farmers that then improve the school food procurement. For instance, in Copenhagen, under the theme of the Kitchen of Tomorrow, it focuses a lot on the circular idea of the food economy, where we have one of the innovation actors, for instance, focuses on using spent grain from breweries and turning the waste product into an input or a resource for another product, which in this case is, for instance, chips, but also flour for baking and breakfast energy drinks. And for instance, another example is in Ostend, the Agro Park, which is aimed at being a public park that has park features, but also agriculture sites, for instance, for a CSA, where people can learn about farming. And it's not just green grass and a lawn where you lay down and read a book, but it's where you get in touch with nature, with environment, learn about where the food has come from. And those are just some snapshots. If you are interested what the other partners are doing, please go on the website. There are portraits from each hub, and you can learn more about the ideas and the goals behind it. Next slide, please. Yes, and then also, despite the varieties among the files, there are also commonalities, which are the 4 impact pathways that we try to focus on, which are citizen empowerment, of course, is one really important one, but also the job creation, the sustainability is an overarching topic, and the food system transformation. And in all the actions we're doing, we always keep this in mind, that we want to achieve this, that we don't lose the agenda, especially in this iterative innovation process. It can easily that you steer off and end somewhere else. But as a reminder, those are the innovation pathways we want to focus on. We also have one work package, for instance, that focuses on the assessment and measuring how good the activities achieve these goals, for instance. So we will also monitor it. Have the 9 accelerator labs across Europe contributed to citizen empowerment, or have they contributed to job creation? Have they contributed to sustainability, and how have they contributed to the transformation of the food system? Next slide, please. And yeah, just a short snapshot. Where are we now? What have we done in the last 1.5 years? Next slide, please. Here you can see well, in a second, yeah. A roadmap of what we've done so far. Some snapshots. We've done a lot more than it fits on one slide, but maybe I took out the highlights, which was the start with a kickoff in Copenhagen last year in 2020. And the majority of last year was dealing with setting up the labs, finding again, like what are our innovation goals? What do you want to achieve? Who are the network partners? Who do we want to collaborate with? What are the resources we might need? What are the needs and the support we can get from the FOODSHIFT project? What can the partners benefit from it? And so on and so forth. And in Berlin, for instance, it also involved a change of the partners for various reasons, because we couldn't enter the building we wanted to go into. And all of these processes, finding ourselves where we are, how we can work together, that all was involved in the setting up the labs. And then, yeah, down there you can see the sticky notes. The online participants can see it better, the take actions. We made so-called action plans, where we really spelled out 4 innovation goals. What are the concrete resources for it? What are the concrete steps? How do we want to achieve it? With whom do we want to achieve it? And what support do we need? And this is a very detailed plan that helped us at the beginning. But I talked to Lisa yesterday, for instance, and Lisa approached me and said, hey, we need to talk about the 4th goal again. How do we continue? Maybe what are the changes? So this is not a map that is stable for the 4 years, but it's more like a guiding, like a compass that can be adjusted throughout the process as you learn, as you move on. And then we also had thanks to Corona, lots of online exchange between different partners with different formats. There was, for instance, their regular public webinars, where the topics of FOODSHIFT are open to the public. Other participants can join in. We had, for instance, a public webinar about citizen empowerment. The next one will be on food policy. That's open for the public. Then we also have knowledge exchange between the FALs, so where FALs, the Accelerator labs, partner up and have a common theme and can learn from each other. We also have very informal formats like the breakfast meetings, where every second Friday of the month people can join in with their coffee and say, hey, I have this issue, or I need this information, and it's just an informal exchange. And the FOODSHIFT workshops, where that is more focused also on how to implement the project goals from the work packages and the communication with the labs and vice versa. Then we also did a lot of identifying and engaging with the food innovators, as we call them, where we did some interviews with them, what the challenges are, what the needs are, and how we can collaborate with them. And now we're starting actually in the implementation action phase, where the ideas we have written down on paper actually gets translated into practices in the reality. And the kickoff is also in Berlin, parallel to the kickoff of the Berlin actions. So for the next couple of months, there will be lots of stuff going on. And we are also slowly coming into the phase of maturing, combining, and upscaling. So now that we know what the ideas and the goals are, with the support from the partners in FOODSHIFT, we want to figure out how can you improve it? How can you make it better, more professional, the first niche ideas? How can you maybe combine forces and resources and make it more stable, so it's not just a short-term idea? And how can you upscale it or outscale it, for instance, with the food hubs in Berlin? By outscaling, like multiplying them all over the city, you can also make them bigger and create a bigger impact. Yeah, that was the path we've had so far. I think that was the last slide. Is there one more slide? I don't know. I think there was the last one.
No.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, now I would give the word to...
Well, we're kicking off our action, right? So we're slowly starting the gear. So now we'll give the word to José, because now we heard about what's the state of affairs of the project. So we asked José to give a short input about the state of affairs of the world. I wanted to say, of course, that's a lot, but FOODSHIFT, we say we have like one big challenge we deal with is the climate change or breakdown, which affects all parts of food system, and how we can go on or should go on with working for the transition. So José, why don't you give us a short overview where we actually stand physically in the world and what we need to deal with?
Thank you for the question. It is not easy to understand. Yeah, to respond in, or to try to answer it in 5 minutes, but I will try to give you a very short overview. Beatrice mentioned before some keywords we use in the project, which is low carbon, which is plant-based, circular. Also on the website you can see the words localized or also resilient. So yeah, why we are searching for food system transformation, and what is the relation, actually the relationship between the food systems and the planet, or the current situation, especially related to climate change. I wanted to give you some very small or very brief details or updated data about the current situation of climate change. Basically, last month, or I think it was last month, we knew about the last report of the IPCC, and I can give you some very brief details about this. Here I have some graphics, but I think that for our online people it's not very but anyway, maybe our technical staff can do something for this. But basically you can see two graphics, and one graphic is related to the CO2 emission, with the temperature, and you can see that actually the increase in the temperature actually at this moment is a little bit higher than 1 degree. The Paris Agreement says that we should not achieve the 2 degrees, 1.5, especially 1.5 degrees in 2050, but basically according to the last report of the IPCC, we will arrive the 1.5 limit by 2030. So, or probably a little bit earlier than 2030. So in just 5 years we will be 1.5 degrees, and probably in 2050 around 2 degrees, and by the end of this century between 3 and 5 degrees. These are very bad news, of course. But good news is that these are projections, and we can try to not to solve the problem, of course, because it is not possible anymore, but at least to try to mitigate the problem. And this is where food systems can be a very important actor, let's say. Currently, what we know is that, according to the last studies, food systems are responsible for around 1/3 of the CO2 emissions to the atmosphere. When I say CO2 emissions, it's CO2 equivalent. I am considering all the greenhouse gas emissions involved in the food system. I am considering not only direct emissions, but also indirect emissions. For instance, emissions from transportation of the different food products. So the good thing is that, we can act in different ways to try to, first of all, mitigate climate change. We can do it directly, which is okay. Let's try to produce in a different way, more sustainably. For instance, more organic, avoiding the use of inorganic fertilizers, avoid the use of pesticides, but also indirectly by reducing the distances, that is increasing the regionalization of the food system. And I can give you one value that I think is very visual for everyone. When we consume 1 kilogram of beef, we are emitting approximately around 15 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of beef. Whereas if we consume 1 kilogram of vegetables, we are emitting around 0.1 kilograms of CO2. So we are actually mitigating climate change by shifting diets. The second thing I want to comment it, and the last one, is we can not only mitigate climate change by shifting diets, by shifting the way we produce, but also we have to adapt to climate change, because food systems are also affected by climate change in the way that we will have more droughts, we will have more heavy rains, more catastrophic events. So we have to adapt to that. We have two levels. The first one is the agroecosystem level. We can create more agroecological systems to create more diversified agroecosystems to produce more diversely for the region, but also we can be more resilient for the whole food system. If we have a regionalized food system and not a globalized food system, we are less affected by international disruptions like the ones we saw with the COVID-19. So I think, just for concluding, we can act in both ways for mitigate climate change, that is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but the other way is to be more resilient and to adapt to the future climate events we will suffer.
Thank you, Jose. So I don't know how you guys feel. I feel always overwhelmed, because on the one hand it's very clear, on the other hand, of course, it's huge task. And now we as Baumhaus, I am since this year practical partner. So I'm wondering, how can we actually do our best on really working towards a food shift or food transition? And I feel it's this huge gap between the challenge or the crisis and the practical action we can do here in Baumhaus, which is a small space, it's a small project. So I would like to know from Luke, who is our scientific project manager, who is in the video call. So how can FOODSHIFT actually contribute, given the scientific fact, given the urgency, given the approach of FOODSHIFT, which works with very small projects at least with us here in Baumhaus, very small practical partners. So how do you see the pathways of the impact really pushing forward the acceleration of the transition?
Good question. Everything looks amazing there. So good morning to you all. Originally, I was planning to attend in person, and so I would have been able to give this this feedback directly. But given that I'm online, and we actually have our project coordinator, Christian Bugger Henriksen, also online, I think that maybe I'd actually see if he would like to actually answer this. Christian?
Yes, sure. Hi, everybody. First, I would actually like to say that really fantastic introduction to the FOODSHIFT 2030 project by Karen, Beatrice, and Jose Luis. And I have to say that I really like your emphasis on the fact that the FOODSHIFT project is focused on citizen-driven food system innovation, because I think citizens are at the very core of the project. And I think Berlin is really the perfect place to showcase that, and also how we can empower citizens to make the best choice for their own food consumption, and also influence the way that food is produced, distributed, and consumed within their city region. And I think that brings me to the, an attempt to answer your very good question, is that I think if we can really mobilize the citizens in this food system transformation, if we can show how all citizens can find their own way in the transformation of our food system, and take ownership of the food shift by working towards making our food systems more sustainable, plant-based, and localized, then I think we are at a very good starting point. And I think you may say that you have a rather small case or a small innovation here, but the idea is, of course, that with Baumhaus, I mean, you really show an example of how people can come together and join forces for a transformation of the food system. So what I would foresee for Baumhaus is that such an initiative can grow, both in terms of maybe number of people that come to Baumhaus, but there's also, of course, a limit to the size of your current buildings. But then it would also, be able to make satellites in other places in Berlin, where you could have similar houses, in other places in Germany, in other places in Europe. And I think that's really the case with the Baumhaus, and that's also the case with the other types of innovations that we're working with in the FOODSHIFT project. That what we're going to do in that project, and I'm sure Dirk can probably take over from me afterwards and explain how we are really going to take all these innovations, how are we going to mature them, how can we as a project support all the innovations that come from all the different EU partners here. We have at least 10 plus innovations in each of our city regions already defined. So how can we take these innovations, how can we mature them, how can we combine them with each other, how can we bring you together so that you can learn from each other, and how can we then scale them? How can we scale all these ideas so that they multiply and so that they grow, and so that they can really contribute to this transformation of the food system? I think with that, I would pass on the word to Dirk here to go maybe more in detail with how we are going to do this.
We heard before. This project, FOODSHIFT 2030, is an innovation action project in the, let's say, definition of the European Commission. And that is also basically building the foundation of much of the project's structure and activities. So in a strong way, innovation stands central. We also know that innovation is not an easy word. It's even a buzzword. It's a word you can discuss a long time with many different experts without coming necessarily to a clear conclusion. That's the case with a couple of words which play a role here. But it's our job to give meaning to this. And I think we've advanced in this way quite a bit. So one of the things is that we, of course, are looking out for the innovation examples in the city regions we cooperate with. And we tracked them down, and we made an inventory. Was part of the first 1.5 years to gather this information. It has been mentioned before, and so there are indeed a big variety of main topics. Beatrice had mentioned them. I don't need to repeat them. But underneath you have often 10 and ultimately a number of 90 innovation cases which fit to the innovation focus of each of the labs. And One way of understanding innovation is to just examine the question, how far is this innovation developed? And for example, there we do have this, these references which are quite known, at least at the European Union, at some business levels, which are called the technological readiness levels, which mean, you know, from the beginning where you scribble an idea, an innovation idea on a beer pad, which is kind of the classical example, in an inspiring evening. You move on and start really calling up people, start to raise funds, come up with a plan, develop you know, a certain type of prototype, and move on, even to really the full establishment and the upscaling dimension of that idea. And the examples which we have gathered often have gone along these types of processes. So it's not just something which is only in the textbooks, which is really partly mirroring the reality of how innovations develop. The way we look at it, and which we are also convinced of, is that innovation doesn't need to be born in, you know, in let's say scientific, experimental, high-tech world, but that there are many different, very important forms of innovation which we take up and which we consider part of the whole system. We therefore also talk about different dimensions of innovation, of product innovation, process innovation, social innovation, and governance innovation. All these participants are one way or the other involved in these types of, sometimes stronger, sometimes less. It's in the nature of things that, you know, with the funds, with the human resources, you cannot all, you know, embrace and follow up everything. This is where the project comes in. So we see a clear, let's say, synergy process or potential in strengthening some of the innovations in the parts which they simply cannot immediately put all their resources in. Therefore, we need to understand at which stage they are. And this is exactly what we have done now. And we're very happy about what happened in the last couple of months, that we have this type of overview. And so we definitely also look at the social innovation as being a strong pillar of our approaches, in which we see different forms of interaction where the Baumhaus is a great example of, and where the thought of just multiplying the efforts of outscaling is clearly part of something which hasn't been yet done in a very structured or in a very, you know, clearly established way, and where we see an innovative way evolving here at the Baumhaus, not inside only this beautiful walls, but beyond, and with maybe a discussion you had already with similar initiatives just 2 days ago, where we see that the network is growing and where there are FOODSHIFT ideas being already passed on to interested groups, and where the process of upscaling and outscaling is starting to work. So yeah, I mean, there's lots to say, of course, in this whole topic of understanding and working and moving on with innovation. But maybe a last word. We do have implementation targets. We have a mission, the circularity, the type of plant-based food. We want to just really give a major role in this, and the impact on climate change, the positive one. So we are making sure, in the cooperation with the FOLDS, that those innovation cases get really the attention, get the opportunity to unfold, link up with the necessary support services, and hopefully develop to this type of impact. We all need to also reach to come up with that hopeful perspective, Jose, you sketched out. So yeah, thanks for this, and any questions you can ask later on.
Well, thank you, Dirk. Poppy, do you just want to add on that? And I want maybe to add a little bit, because we work, like the words of scaling before FOODSHIFT, I connected that a lot with the business world. So I thought, whoa, we're not really working with the business mindset of that we want to grow and grow. So maybe you could also explain a bit what scaling in terms of FOODSHIFT means in connection with local food projects that are mostly citizen-run.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point here about the scaling and this not being in the traditional sense of having a business and growing to new markets, your profits increasing. That's not always what we're talking about in FOODSHIFT. And I had the pleasure to be able to actually read all of the innovation profiles we collected. So I think we are at around 80 profiles now that we have across Europe from innovators that are doing something in their local communities. And it became very clear quite quickly by reading these that indeed it's not always about business for these people. And a lot of these people, they're not doing it because they think, oh, I can make a lot of money off this and I want to be a business person and an entrepreneur, but it's more that they want to do something for the community. And they often don't have a background in business or entrepreneurship. So they're also a bit stuck sometimes of, okay, I want to do something, but how do I do it? And how do I reach the impact I want to get? So in FOODSHIFT, we had to kind of rethink, what does scaling mean? and also, what does this maturing mean? What do these technological readiness levels mean in the context of FOODSHIFT? And so we had some discussions about this, and it really relates to the local context. So for example, upscaling for a normal business might be more profit, more employees, more products moving, all this kind of thing. But in FOODSHIFT, we have entrepreneurs that think, okay, the upscaling doesn't mean that for me. It means that I get one more person in the door to come for dinner, for example, to the Baumhaus. It means upscaling might mean, okay, maybe I'm not doing the next step, but I'm inspiring someone else to start an initiative. So it's really building these ecosystems. And I think that's also part of the impact in the upscaling. It's not necessarily one person doing everything. It's scaling impact with other people. So inspiring people to be brave. We've talked about that a lot this week, also with the Baumhaus. Being brave and inspiring people to step out and do something as well. And this is how you create scale and engaging these citizens. So I think that's a little bit, in short, what it means in FOODSHIFT. And of course, we have to apply that to local context. In Barcelona, they're dealing a lot with technology. Upscaling in tech is a lot different than upscaling in governance. And it's very context specific. So I think for us, it's really about impact and really engaging people, whatever form that takes. So we're kind of throwing away the rule book, let's say the traditional rule book of scaling. And we're really looking at, okay, how do we engage, how do we inspire, and how do we get people to really take action? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think those were really nice ending closing words of the first panel round. So we have, although we had technical difficulties in the beginning, we still have some minutes left. So I would like to ask Lisa, who's been monitoring the chat, were there any comments, questions? No, that's great. We're even better in time now. So are there any questions or comments here in the space? Beautiful. So then we did a really good job explaining it, because since I started to read all the papers and project proposals in the beginning of this year, it actually took me some months to understand this project. So that's really cool. And there is a comment now.
Yeah, it's not a question, just a comment, and I want to share it with you because it's very nice from Luca. She said, great interventions from all of you. It's amazing what the project done in such challenging times.
Okay, so then I have one last question, and I would like to have from all you guys one sentence. Also, Christian and Luke, maybe you can chip in. So do you have a vision, although we are in this like open process? Do you have a vision or a dream in 2 years when we meet here again towards the end of the FOODSHIFT project? Do you have a vision what you would have liked to achieve, or what do you see by then? Go to start, Beatrice.
Great.
One sentence.
It's a curse and an opportunity. Well, of course, for one, I would like to see a lot more food hubs with the spirit of the Baumhaus in Berlin, which I think is a great role model. But what I would also like to see is just more humane relations among people, but also improved relation with the planet, towards food, with the ecosystems we are in. Yeah, that we take ownership and also care and responsibility of our ecosystems, our planets, our families, our animals. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Following Beatrice's comments, I would add only that I would like to see the city of Berlin full of food hubs, but also the surrounding areas of Berlin full of small farms providing food to Berlin and also for the region of Brandenburg, to be surrounded by a lot of biodiversity, really nice environment. So yeah, this is my vision.
Thank you. Well, I'd really like to see that the Food Council becomes a really strong element of the city government and is providing visibility to the initiatives, is able to really generate funding, make sure that unfair pricing and the misbalance in the industrial food system is overcome, and that there is really a political governmental change in the Berlin approach.
I think from my side, it would be really inspiring to see people changing from the sort of passive attitude about the food system, it is the way it is and there's nothing I can do about it, to taking more of an active stance and perhaps even doing something themselves, or having these light bulb moments and realizing, okay, it's not just something that is how it is, but it's something that can be changed and improved.
Maybe I can go next. So I have a very task-orientated. Okay, just a second. I have a really bad echo when I speak. I have a really task-orientated ambition. Is that in FOODSHIFT we have 9 FOODSHIFT Accelerator labs, and we hope that we can replicate some of these processes in 27 other city regions. So for me, if we can sit here in 2 and a little bit more years and say that we've achieved this, I think that would be a great outcome.
I can only follow up on what Poppy and Luke just said. I think I have many visions, but one of them is definitely, going from this consumer self-perception to a citizen, food citizen perception is crucial, I think, for transforming the food system. I would also like to see the FOODSHIFT Accelerator labs now developing and multiplying into numerous FOODSHIFT enabler labs. And then I'd like to see our overarching food system, of course, become more plant-based, but also that the animals that are still in the system are produced in a much more sustainable way, taking care of both nature, biodiversity, and animal welfare. And finally, I would love to see our food system develop into a much more localized food system that will complement this global food system that is ruling everything as we have now. Because with a more localized food system, we'll have a much more resilient and sustainable food system as well, where we can also reinstate the position of the farmers and the food producers in the food system, and connect the food producers with the food citizens. So that would be my vision.
Well, one thing I thought after Poppy gave her introduction, what I would love to see is that we continue in the direction of FOODSHIFT, shifting away from a business mindset, and that the system is defined and driven by economic logics and capitalist logics towards more social and citizen-driven ideas, and that these are the defining parameters and agendas to organize our societies in the system. But the question I had would be towards you, Karin, what your vision is and what you think you could take from FOODSHIFT for the development of the food hubs, Baumhaus, or yourself.
what did you say? What I can take from FOODSHIFT?
Or what your vision is within. So the same question you asked towards you.
Well, my vision is, and I agree to everything you guys said. So in addition to that, I think this is a great chance to build a network and to really have some capacity to work together with very diverse actors in Berlin, Brandenburg, in the city region, but also connect with them in other cities in Berlin, in Europe. Sorry, they're just the more people walking in. And to build a network of action where we not just build networks with the idea to exchange what we do, but find ways to really practical support each other with all the people who want to do something or are already active doing, because that's something I already saw in the last half year of getting to know partners of FOODSHIFT. There are so many people in so many different cities who want to take more action. So I think there's all this potential, and we all know that we need to take the action now, this year, next year, in the next 5 years, so that we really find ways to put this potential into transformative action.
Mm-hmm. I thought there was a question. Yeah, there's one more from the chat.
Yeah, Raluca asked, if FOODSHIFT project would be about to start today, would you do something different in Berlin than you've done?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is the perfect transition to our next blog, which is about the Berlin Lab. So I think we can answer that directly by going to the next blog. So then I would like to have a few places changed. So Dirk and Poppy, put your mask back on. There. And Lisa, you want to join us in the front? And maybe give the chat watching to Regina. And Julius. Just left. Okay. Okay. So we have 1 minute of people going different places. Well, but I'm going to start answering the question, which I think the answer is yes, because we did that. I mean, there was the start of FOODSHIFT of the last year, and then because the practical partner then, THF Vision, who wanted to build a big food campus on the Tempelhofer Field, so a big former airport area in Berlin, and then it turned out like Beatrice said, that there was no chance in the next years to get into this area. So that was a reset of the project here in Berlin, and we spent the first months of this year to really go back to zero, with Baumhaus as a new partner, with Lisa as a new person from the Berlin Food Policy Council who joined the project, to say, okay, so what are our goals? So I feel it feels a bit like we're starting again now this year, although we already were in exchange before. Do you want to add something to that?
I can't really think of something that if I could go back would change, but maybe for the future, or that it's still an ongoing process and learning process, and although we're working together for quite some months now, it still needs a lot of space for communication and still understanding what are the needs and interests and ideas. And that, I think, for the next couple of months, I would take with us that we still work on how do we communicate and translate the ideas from FOODSHIFT into practice so people can understand it on the ground. How do we communicate with researchers, and how do we communicate among us? But other than that, other than the changes, I don't really think I would have done something different, because I liked the way the process worked out so far. And yeah, I would like to keep the openness and the also sometimes informal talks. It's not just online meetings where you have discussions. Sometimes it's also just Karin calling me up and saying, hey, I don't understand this, or can you help me this? Or I call up Karin and say, what the fuck is going on? and having space, excuse my vulgar language. But having those informal places to communicate and reorientate and arrive where we are and where we want to go, that is something really important.
And this is now the next phase we get in, because we now open the informal communication towards all of you and start to connect with more actors in Berlin. So in the spirit of getting the communication ready, Beatrice, do you want to try to give a short explanation of what the Berlin Lab is?
Sure, I always try. If I fail, I try again. Okay, do we have the presentation? Yes. So I have 3 questions here that I would like to use as an orientation point to explain you the Berlin Lab. For one, who are we? What is our vision? And how do we want to get there? Maybe we start with who are we? Next slide, please. And that also took a while to figure out who we are and how do we set it up. Because in FOODSHIFT language, there are all these technical terms, like we call Berlin Lab, Berlin Fall for Fast Acceleration Lab. But we also, it took a long time to define our roles and responsibilities and how do we work together. But basically we have within the Berlin Food Hub Lab, 4 core partners, which is for one, the Baumhaus as the lab leader, where all the innovation takes place. The actors are, the food hub prototype will be developed on site, but also the concepts to outscale it. Then we have the Ernährungsrat Berlin, the Food Policy Council Berlin, as the lab host, which is the partner more responsible for the political agenda, bringing food or continuing to bring food on the political agenda to advocate for the food hubs in Berlin, the interests and needs, and making sure that there's also a political framework or a governance environment that is ready for the food hubs to be established and scaled out. Because if the idea is super great, but there are so many political and governmental restrictions to implement them, then we can't get further. And then we have the 2 partners, Agratea and Salv, in the role of the lab assistant that help them methodology. For instance, if they want to do a workshop, we can contribute, but they also support them in translating the FOODSHIFT language, explaining the tasks, supporting them, for instance, last year with the interviews of the innovators. And and the SALF also has the role as a scientific partner, where we do also the impact assessment, where Jose Luis will talk more about it, where we also look at from a governance perspective, which also helps to increase the policy agenda of the Ernährungsrat. And just from a scientific perspective to see are the actions that take place here contributing the food system transition we want to achieve. But those are not the only actors in the Berlin Lab. Next slide, please. Of course, there are lots of other actors, the innovators connected, for instance, all the CSA, the farmers, other food hub initiatives in Berlin, but also the government, represented by the Senate for Consumer Protection, who helped us a lot, and we collaborate a good bit. So the Berlin Food Hub is a collection of lots of innovators and inspiring people with great spirits that want to change the world, even if it's just in a small place. Yes, next slide, please. And what's our vision? I put like 3 big words here as an orientation guide. For one, it's addressing or building up short food supply chains. We want to establish direct ways linking the farmers in Brandenburg with the consumers in Berlin and having direct relations to shorten the food supply chain. But we also want, of course, the biggest overall vision is the food system transformation. But not only changing the way we produce and eat our food, but like also Jose Luis mentioned already, the important word of resilience, which is to cope with shocks, to cope with crisis, because we can't prevent it. Even if we try to reduce the CO2 emissions, there might be a next pandemic. And what do you do then? And to be able to react to it, to cope with it, to respond to crisis, we want to increase the resilience of the system. And how do we want to achieve those big, gigantic visions of food system transformation, resilience, and short food supply chains? Next slide, please. This is by building up food hubs all over the city. We call it in German Lebensmittelpunkt, oder Lebensmittelpunkte, many. And the Baumhaus serves as a lighthouse project for the food system transformation in Berlin-Brandenburg by setting up a prototype of what a food hub could be, but always thinking of the open space that other initiatives might have their own addition to it. And yeah, we are developing the concept of providing a space for direct trade of regional food, of sharing food, of preparing food, of consuming food. The people that were here yesterday and also online already saw some of the actions. But also of co-learning while simultaneously enabling inclusive communities and building community building and empowerment. So all of these things that are usually in the city separate from each other, you have either the places where you get your food or you have places where there's community building engagement activities, but to combine that in one place, that is the new idea. Yeah, and also along our vision is to, based on that prototype, what we want to establish here in the Baumhaus, to spread that all over the city, to outscale it, but we also call it deep scale it, which is bringing it to the minds and the hearts of the people, that people understand what this is about and how you go about. Yeah, and to go in more detail, we have formulated 4 so-called innovation goals, and those will be now presented one by one by Karen, Jose Luis, Julius, and Lisa. And I give the word now to Karen, because you have the innovation goal 1.
And 3.
And 3, yeah, but we start with a 1.
Well, I'm combining them. So, because actually how we work, it's basically we have 3 work groups. So we have the one around Baumhaus, who does the practical action. We have the second one, which is around Self, who does the impact assessment. And we have the working group 3, which is the Berlin Food Policy Council, or Ernährungsrat, who works on providing a political democratic space for citizen-driven actions. So I will tell you a little bit about what our role here as Baumhaus is and how we want to achieve or work on those 2 goals of building up the prototype. So the 2 goals of our working group of the practical actions, on the one hand, to further build up the Lebensmittelpunkt prototype in Baumhaus, and on the other hand, to scale in all the ways we just talked about. We don't start at 0. The idea of Lebensmittelpunkte does not come from FOODSHIFT. It comes from Berlin civil society already in 2015. And the Berlin Food Policy Council supported the idea from the very beginning. And so it's been around for some years in Berlin. There were several volunteers groups who already started Lebensmittelpunkt initiatives. So we as Baumhaus started to get involved last year when we did a project funded by the city of Berlin, which was the Werkstatt Lebensmittelpunkte. So for half a year, we worked here in Baumhaus with the existing Lebensmittelpunkt initiatives, with with all kinds of food projects in Berlin. So people from food sharing, from local farmers, CSAs, so community supported agriculture groups and others to further develop the idea and the concept, how can we actually build up this idea of urban food hubs or Lebensmittelpunkte. Don't know if you can all see those points there. So basically, we define a Lebensmittelpunkt as a place or a network of places with 3 different main functions. So the one is a depot, where we can come together as neighbors to get, yes, Beatrice, if you may hold them up. So we have the one part is the depot, where we come together to get regional food, but also support food rescuing, so food sharing and other initiatives. The second part is a kitchen, the yellow one, where we can come together as neighbors to cook together, and to eat together, but also to preserve food. And the third one we call Kiez, so neighborhood, which means that we with the Lebensmittelpunkt concept, we think there's a huge function and importance on the social cultural part. So have Lebensmittelpunkte as a place for people coming together, for encounters, for lived solidarities with the farmers, with the planet, with the animals, but also with each other in the neighborhood and with different groups and very diverse people in the neighborhoods. So you can, yes, thank you. So that's the one part we developed last year, where we were already in exchange cooperation with FOODSHIFT without being part of it. So we called each other back then already a lot. But we also started to build a network, and we supported other people to start this food hub initiative. So we built on all that now as being part of FOODSHIFT. So where the working group 1 now stands with the practical action is that we do have the concept for the prototype. We started the action at Baumhaus again this spring, so starting in May, we built up the depot action, so we now have 5 CSAs, so 5 local vegetable boxes in Baumhaus every week that can get picked up by neighbors. You're going to hear more about that in a little bit. Yesterday we started the kitchen part. So we're really excited about that. So from now on, every week, we're going to cook again together with neighbors and try to build systems to make it as efficient and scalable in all these dimensions as possible. And then also we're going to build more again on the Kiez part. So to build cooperations in the neighborhood, to get more people together in different ways. So we are big in the process of the prototype being up and running in all dimensions. The second part we have is, so from last year, summer, there were 4 or 5 groups who called themselves Lebensmittelpunkt initiatives. Now there are 15. And we had a couple of days ago, we had our kickoff as the Lebensmittelpunkt network. So we don't work top down, but we as Baumhaus feel as part of the Lebensmittelpunkt movement that is getting built up. And we try to support it and work together. And now what we're starting in the fall is that we want to work more with other food initiatives. So we talked about the innovators, to see how can we connect those innovations more with the Lebensmittelpunkt, with the prototype, but also with the other initiatives. How can we support each other better and to work together to scale the different groups' approaches in Berlin? You can see some of the stakeholders that we want to work with in the afternoon. And with that, I think this is the state of affairs, and I give the word to the second working group to talk about the impact assessment.
You can say something on the socialization.
Yeah, okay. The second innovation goal is a participatory impact assessment, which means that together with the Baumhaus, we would like to measure the actions that are taking place here and figure out their contribution to the food system transition. And the impact assessment has multiple dimensional parts. It's a biophysical, social impact assessment. So we look at biophysical dimension and the social dimension. Due to Corona, as Karin mentioned, the cooking activities and so on couldn't take place. So we were starting with the biophysical part, where Jose Luis will focus on in a minute. And the social part just started up now. That is still building up. So for today, to give you an insight of what's happening in the impact assessment, we focus on the biophysical part, and Jose Luis will talk about it. And Julius, yeah.
Can you please show the presentation?
Yeah. Hello, also from my side. I'm Julius and also part of the lab assistance team. And together with Jose Luis, we will give you some insights on our findings, but only the biophysical part of this impact assessment. So, luckily, despite the pandemic, the Food Hub could already be used as a depot and distribution point for regionally produced food. Or maybe next slide, please. And therefore, we already had the opportunity to start with the first part of the impact assessment, which is about the food distribution. And currently we have 5 different CSAs, which are all from Brandenburg or regions close to Berlin, delivering food to the Food Hub on a weekly basis. And for those of you who are not familiar with the CSA concept yet, I just give a quick explanation what it is. It stands for Community-Supported Agriculture, in German Solidarische Landwirtschaft. And it is about, or it is an operating model for farms that re-enhances a closer connection between consumers and farmers. And a certain number of consumers subscribe to the harvest of a specific farm or group of farms. And they guarantee a monthly monetary contribution to this farm. And in return, they get a certain amount of fresh or processed crops. And all what they get during for 1 week can be referred to as one share. So whenever I use the word share, I refer to this meaning. Yeah, and at the Baumhaus we have 5 of such CSAs, and it works like this. They come each week. They deliver a certain amount of products to the Food Hub, and then usually 1 or 2 members of each CSA come to the Food Hub and help splitting up the produce into equally mixed shares. And then the remaining members of the CSA come and to the Food Hub store and pick up their share. So in order to determine the biophysical impact of those food distribution activities, we have developed a monitoring system. Next slide, please. A monitoring system that allows us to collect and show information on the amount of food that is passing through the Food Hub. And to collect the data, each week we met at the Baumhaus and on the distribution days of the CSAs, and we registered all quantities and qualities of food that were distributed and transferred them to the table, to an Excel sheet, which we are working with. And the Excel table consists of different sheets, 1 sheet for each day, 1 sheet for each CSA, and 1 big overview table where all data is displayed and summarized. And that makes it very easy for us to track on a daily, weekly and monthly basis the development of the amount of food passing through the Food Hub, because the amount of food is our key performance indicator, and all other calculations which are part of the biophysical impact assessment are based on this number. And on the pictures you can see José Luis and me in the room, where we carried out the measurements, and sometimes we also had to measure the weight of the vegetables manually, because usually the CSAs brought a delivery sheet where all numbers are written on. It was very easy to transfer them to the table, but sometimes we had to do it manually, and we got very nice support also from Karen and Javier. So thank you very much. And maybe a little bit more interesting than the methods are the first results we got. And I would move on to the next slide. And even one more slide. And I will start with the diversity of crops delivered. A total of 73 different kind of crops was distributed at the Food Hub during the last 3 months, of which 42 were vegetables, 26 types of herbs, and 5 types of fruit. So regarding the diversity, one could say that I think the offer in the Food Hub is in no way inferior to that of other widespread sources of supply, such as supermarkets, for example. And I would bet that there were also some species that you would not find in any conventional supermarket. It's very interesting to see that. But currently more important for us than the diversity is the amount of food. So I would move on to the next slide, where we have some numbers on the amount of food. A total of 2.2 tons was distributed during the last 3 months. 90% of it were vegetables, taken together 80 kilogram of herbs and fruit, and 160 kilogram of processed food, which includes plant-based processed food such as bread and cereals and flour, and also animal-based processed food such as cheese, yogurt, and eggs. But currently we are only focusing on vegetables, because there's a better availability of comparative statistical data on vegetables, which we need for our calculations. So next slide, please. There we have some numbers on vegetables. As you can see in the graph, there are differences between the species. There are some varieties such as, I think, potatoes, zucchini, carrots, which account for the largest share, and others, other varieties such as sweet corn, peas, paprika, which account for a comparatively small share. And those proportions between the types of vegetables will become very interesting, where my colleague José Luis is later going to link them to information on their CO2 emissions and land footprints. Next slide, please. Here you can see the development of the total amount of food distributed at the Food Hub. We started with around about 100 kilograms per week in May, and this number rose up to around about 200 kilograms of products each week in July and August. And another number which is not shown in the graph, but also interesting, is the relative number, the amount of food distributed in relation to the number of households or shares. And there we have an average of 3.5 kilograms. So each share got on average 3.5 kilograms of fresh produce each week from the Food Hub. I think those changes, also temporal changes, because we had, for example, regarding the diversity, in the beginning of May, we had only 9 different products per week distributed. Now in July and August, we had already 30 different kinds of products each week, roundabout. And I'm really looking forward to see those changes over time when we have collected, when we will have collected maybe data on for a whole year or even longer periods of time. But for now, I will hand over to my colleague José Luis, who is going to give you insights on his calculations, which are based on these numbers.
Thank you very much, Julius. With your permission, I think I will move to that chair because my neck is not flexible enough to. I'm sorry because I will be not looking at you, but it's much easier for me. Sorry. Can you move, please, to the next slide? As Julius said, we use the amount of food as our key performance indicator. That means the rest of the impacts would be calculated based on the amount of food we got. Please, next slide. So until the week of the 19th of August, we got around 2,000 kilograms of vegetables. That means, considering the number of shares, we estimate around 20 kilograms per capita. That means, considering the consumption in Germany of vegetables per year, which is 80 kilograms per capita a year, we have estimated that we have contributed around to 20-25% to the total food self-sufficiency per year and per capita, considering the normal consumption of a average German person. Next slide, please. Yeah, another, sorry because I'm going so quick. The next impact is the greenhouse gas emissions. I'm talking, I say CO2, but actually CO2 equivalent. I mean, I will not explain you the calculations, but just the results. We have estimated the avoided CO2 emissions from that amount of vegetables we have distributed so far. We have split the results between the production and transportation, but in total it's 285 kilograms of CO2 that we have so far avoided to be emitted to the atmosphere. More or less, I would say, like 60-40% for the transportation and production respectively. It is not a huge amount of CO2. Actually, it is the amount of CO2 that you emit if you travel, for instance, on holidays to Mallorca and you come back from Berlin. More or less that amount of CO2. Later on, I will explain you a little bit more on these details. Please, next slide. Yeah, this you have in this slide the differences between products. You can see huge differences between products. The differences are due to different drivers, but mainly we found that the main impact is that there are some products that we are importing from other countries at this moment in Germany, but that can be produced relatively easily, sustainably here in our region, surrounding region, which is Brandenburg. Yeah, you can see, for instance, salad and zucchini are very easily to be produced, but we usually import them. So, yeah, this is the reason behind we can avoid a lot of CO2 emissions from those products. Please, next slide. Another interesting impact is the amount of land we are using. It is just a few amount of land. We have estimated that only 0.1 hectares have been used to produce all the vegetables that have arrived here. That means this is just a very, very few amount of land. And basically, there's a big contribution is from salad and from beans, because yields of those products are relatively low and highly consumed. Whereas other products like zucchini, we saw before, the productivity of zucchini is so high, so we don't occupy a lot of land for that. Next slide, please. If we try to scale out the Lebensmittelpunkt, the food hubs, we could try to do some very brief calculations. That is, we have estimated that per year and capita, we in Germany need around 65 square meters for producing our consumption of vegetables. That means for all Berliners would be around 24,000 hectares. That looks like a huge amount, but actually it's really low. So knowing that the vegetables distributed so far here in the food hub, we have used around 1,000 square meters, and that we would avoid, as we saw before, 250 kilograms of CO2, we could say, okay, if we are using around 24,000 hectares for producing the whole vegetables for Berlin, actually we would avoid emissions of 56,000 tons of CO2 per year for Berlin. So I think that this number is really important for everyone. So 250 so far, but if we try to extrapolate the results from food, from this prototype to the consumption of the whole Berlin, we got that number. Please, next slide. Then, yeah, but how can we do that? And that's, yeah, again, let's do another exercise. How many Lebensmittelpunkte could be in Berlin? So, considering a radius of 1 kilometer, that means 15 minutes walking. We have estimated our PhD student Fabian Kleb, which is not here, but he has developed this nice study. We estimate around 200 Lebensmittelpunkte in Berlin at the level of sub-district. If we consider 1 kilometer of radius in Berlin, would be more or less the level of sub-district. Yeah, please, next slide. Just to tell you a little bit about our next steps for the following years. Please, next slide. I have said before about the yeah, next slide, please. Great, thank you. About the amount of Lebensmittelpunkte that should be or could be located in Berlin. But what is the impact on the surrounding area? We saw before the need for 24,000 hectares, right? But where could be located? Yeah, for that reason, in FOODSHIFT we have a very nice models and very nice tools. For instance, the Metropolitan Foodscape Planner with the map table from Dick Bassa, who is here, and also our FOODSHIFT model. If we combine the results, we could be able to work with the people here, to do some workshops, and then to try to say, okay, what would you like to have those land? So it's one radius of, I don't know, 10 kilometers, 30. So we will get very nice insights about the impacts on the land that we should use for producing those vegetables. And next slide, and the final one, it is, yeah, I have showed you some results, mainly quantitative results, but we will work also on some qualitative results. That means, what is the impact on biodiversity, resilience? How can we measure resilience? Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. There are some qualitative indicators we can assess, and for that we will be using the agroecology criteria tool, also suggested by the FAO, and we will characterize our CSA farms according to this tool, so that we can at least show you qualitatively how we are impacting positively in all those principles you can see on the slide at the agroecosystem level on the one hand, the three first levels, and also on at the food system scale, the level 4 and the level 5. So in the following years we will show you those results. And yeah, that's all from our side. Yeah.
Thank you, Jose. I think for me, the Berlin Lab and being part of the Berlin Lab means really that we have this great collaboration opportunity. So as like small local projects, we can work with scientists like Beatrice and Jose and in other cities and say, hey, we need data on this, and we want to prove that what we do makes sense. And now we have direct partners with time and capacity to produce that.
There's one question.
I understand that. So before I continue, we take the question.
Yeah, it's very technical question. Thank you for presenting your research, Jose Luis. I have a small question. Yeah, for sure. Because I know that in the Berlin and Brandenburg there is a kind of water scarcity, possible problem, and for producing vegetables we do need a lot of water, especially for tomatoes and salad and some others. So did you take into account this possible water shortage? And if yes, what is your forecast?
Thank you very much for the question. I will be very quick, but Yeah, of course, this is a very huge problem. Here, on the one hand, we have one problem in Berlin-Brandenburg that we cannot solve, which is our soils are very poor, are very sandy. So the sand cannot store so much water. So the water is, it can drain a lot, but after 2 days, there's not water anymore into the soil. So we cannot change totally that, but what we propose is to the model of the CSA farms. The CSA farms are applying regenerative farming, which is let's try to use less water on the one hand, and on the other hand, try to avoid losses of water because of the evapotranspiration of the water. So that is, for instance, let's keep the soil with some weeds, wild plants growing on the soil surface, so that because if we don't have those plants, the losses because of the transpiration from the soil are really high. So they apply already these kind of measures. And I didn't mention before this question, but in parallel to the qualitative tool we are going to use, we have also prepared a survey to be delivered to the farmers, so that in that survey we ask them about the amount of water they use for the irrigation, the type of irrigation they have, so that we can also get some very interesting insights about how they manage to reduce the water consumption and to increase the efficiency. Because if you combine in the correct way some crops and at the same time you manage the soil in a good way, you can be really efficient and to avoid the use of a lot of water. So we are aware of the problem, and I think we will give you very interesting insights on by the end of the project.
Mm-hmm. Maybe if I can add some more. In some countries where water is very scarce, they also as well think about changing what is planted. Mm-hmm. That is not only reducing water use, but as well eating something else as salad or tomatoes. So just for you. No, it's just an idea. I mean, we have to change our mindset, I think, as well, in a broader sense.
Thank you. One more question or comment? Yes, or two, and then I really would like to continue. Yes. I just wanted to talk about you, Scotty, but now you can talk yourself.
So you said you need 24,000 hectares of land to cover all the Lebensmittelpunkt that would be needed to make Berlin all groovy, right? What does 24,000 hectares practically look like? Is it like one Kreuzberg? Is it one Mitte? Is it all of Berlin? What's that look like physically?
It's like 24. 1 hectare can be like the surface of a stadium, more or less. So the surface of one stadium is 1 hectare. So if you multiply by 24,000, it is more or less the amount. But it looks so big, but it is not big. I can tell you that in Berlin, without the boundaries, the administrative boundaries of Berlin, we have 4,000 hectares available for agriculture within Berlin. Administrative boundaries. So that is that, in Berlin, for people living in Berlin, you can think that we don't have any land here. Yeah, actually we have, not a lot, but we have 4,000 hectares already. So 1/6 of that land is located within the administrative boundaries of Berlin. It is a very, very small amount of land. Just one detail is even some very big some farms in Brandenburg have a surface of 1,000 hectares. One farm in Brandenburg. So 24 farms in Brandenburg could produce the vegetables for the whole Berlin to meet the current demand of vegetables.
Thank you. Thank you. One more comment and then we move to the last presentation.
Okay, so here's a question in the chat from Raluca. She's asking if you have observed or measured if the price of producing vegetables changed due to the impact of climate change. And she says that in Romania, increasingly more vegetables are produced in open fields, but in greenhouses or polytunnels with increased cost. And local organic farmers here are particularly complaining about the huge difference in temperature, acid rain damaging the plants. And Johanna says support resilient field systems like agroforestry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are not monitoring. Thank you very much for the question. We are not monitoring the prices, but what we can say is that we propose our CSA farms are agroecological. That is, they apply already agroforestry, for instance, but agroecology is more than agroforestry. Agroforestry is just one management you can apply in agroecology. So our CSA farms are already agroforest systems, but also other types of agroecological systems. And considering the prices, what I can say is what the FAO says and has seen already, that is the yields are decreasing in many countries, or you need a lot of more inorganic fertilizers and pesticides to keep the yields. That is, you are spending much more resources for producing the same, whereas in other countries the yields are decreasing. So I am talking about monocrops. In monocrops, the system is not sustainable anymore, economically, environmentally, so we have to shift to the agroecological systems that are resilient, as they already said on the chat. So this is why we propose our CSA farms and agroecological systems. Yeah.
So this hour is to give you an idea of what the Berlin Lab is about. So you heard about the great scientific collaboration we have to get numbers and knowledge and exchange on the facts and on potential pathways to move up projects. We have the Baumhaus, who does the practical action, Scott, who asked the question about the size, he sits there in the back, you can see him, and me. We are here to support and work with local food innovators. And so we cover the practical local action part, we cover the scientific part, but we also thankfully have as the lab host in FOODSHIFT language the Berlin Food Policy Council, who looks at the political part of scaling. So Lisa, do you want to take the last 10 minutes and talk about your part? No.
Yeah, we are in this lab, the Berlin Food Policy Council, to provide political, democratic space for civic-driven actions for food system transition. Yeah, the first slide, please. It's the first. Yes, how you name it in English? Unterziel. Sub-goal. Thank you. Yeah. We divided this innovation focus in four sub-goals. For mainly sub-goals. The first is urban food tubes are an election issue until September this year, now. Yes, and it's already a success that the Green Party, which has great prospects to be in the future government here in Berlin, they has written in their election program urban food hubs all over Berlin. We want to establish at least one urban food hub at different locations in each district. In doing so, we want to involve and actively support civil society initiatives of the LMP Urban Food Hubs movement. So this is already good, and now we can hope that they will be part of the Berlin government. But
you will see that it's not only an issue for this election, the lobby work, it's ongoing. Okay, the next slide, please. Yeah, in short, the second sub-goal is all relevant bodies in district politics and administrations are familiar with the concept of an urban food hub. It's much work to do in the future, in the next weeks and months. How do we will make it real? Yeah, after the election of the Berlin Parliament, we focus on the district level now. We must yes, have several discussions, intern discussions with the LMP movement, Urban Food Hub movement, to find out what are the concrete needs of them to inform the district administration and politics about what an urban food hub needs and what we need of support, and then go and yes, have discussions with administration and politics at the district level, but also parliamentary groups. And we want to have several exchanges here in the Baumhaus so that they can see what a food hub can be. Yes, the Baumhaus as a lighthouse project can express, übermitteln, yeah, communicate when we are here in real in this place. Politicians or administration people can see what could it be, such an urban food hub. The next slide, please. Yeah, genau. Food transition in administration and politics is addressed as a cross-cutting challenge. And the longer version is by the end of 2023. Phew. Okay, I thought it's a really hard to achieve target, but we try. We began with one workshop together with the ZALF and Accelerator. We build up a concept how we can, what we can export, what we want from administration, and we want collaboration with them and to motivate them to see it as their subject, food policy. So one first workshop in June was held, Systemic Solutions for Food Transition, Create Spaces of Opportunities and Administration. And we heard from them lots of points which has to be better in administration and politics. And with these points, we go as Berlin Food Policy Council also to the Senate level and to the district level. So we had lots of benefits from this workshop and also the administrative. And we want to go further. We want to organize further workshops with the motto Good Food Governance, also together with civic person meeting politicians and administrative people to see how we can work better together in the sense of good governance for food policy. Okay, the next slide. Yeah, this means empowerment of Berlin citizens, political contribution to food system change. We want to, as a core target of the FOODSHIFT,
to include civil organizations, Berlin people, to the food strategy. For example, to create rooms of them to meet politicians, what drives politicians, what challenges do they have to deal with, lobby training, and inside the Berlin Food Policy Council, we want to establish a working group we have already began with to support the Urban Food Hub network, and then go out with these people to support our idea. Yes, I think in the whole it was like that. Yes. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. So we have a few minutes left for questions and comments, and then we go into our long lunch break and meet again at 3. But are there in the space any comments, questions, short ones preferably? Very nice, yes. Yeah.
Thanks. Lisa, could you expand a little bit more on your perception of the timing that you have as within the council with regards to the project? Because when you said, for example, in goal 3, I think to touch to the political and to get a change there, and you were a bit laughing.
A little bit what?
Laughing. I mean, suspicious of the short time that we have as a project, and you as an organization.
Lisa, kannst du das Mikrofon?
Ja. Wait, I must I must laugh a little bit because the issue of cross-cutting challenge, it's a really big topic and issue to install, and we only can afford it in collaboration with a lot of people and organizations, not only us here. So I would change the target a little bit in what can we contribute to this goal. It's so it's much more better to formulate it like that.
Do you want to add, Beatrice?
Well, the challenges, I think we already have some really good relationships established with some politicians and some people from the administrations that can be, we call it in the scientific terms, also like policy brokers or intermediaries that work with us and that have a similar mindset and that bring then the agenda from FOODSHIFT or the Baumhaus into the government. However, because of the election, there's no guarantee that those people are going to continue to be in the ruling parties. And if that's not the case, there's going to be a big disruption. And we're still going to have the connection to the people, but we don't know how much power and how much saying they have in the government. And that is something we can't control, we have to deal with. But I can also see a direction that there is an increasing sense of awareness that food is a cross-cutting theme. And in the next couple of years, I think people that deny it or work against it will have a harder time. Because that idea already exists. The question is now how to implement it, how to make it practicable, how can the different resorts in the government work together. But it's less and less being questioned that this is a fact, that food is a cross-cutting theme.
Okay, thank you everyone. Then that was it for the first 2 hours of the regional kickoff. Thank you everyone for participating. like I said, it's just the beginning. So please, if you have ideas, if you want to collaborate, give us more feedback or connections, reach out to us. You see the email in the program. You can come to Baumhaus, contact us. We're really looking forward to work on this the next 2 years and find better ways to move the transition forward faster. And now there is lunch break. See you at 3.
Cool.